Well, if you want to know a little bit before we start, because maybe you don't know who I am, as I said, Professor Shaun. I have a master's in the teaching of English from Birmingham University. I work for the Brazilian government here in Brasilia. I've worked in organizations such as Ministério Público, STF, in all of the areas of law, basically, giving legal English courses. I also deal with public administration, of course, in the areas. I give regular courses at the TCU and CGU. And I have to remember all of the other places I've taught in the past as well. But I'm regularly invited, sometimes very specific classes for people at high level in the government, ministers and presidents of different areas of the government, to teach them, to prepare them to communicate well and to represent Brazil. Of course, I spent 10 years teaching at the Itamaraty at Rio Branco, Institute Rio Branco, so I'm very well averse to what's happening in the government, the things that change, and how we should prepare you based on what the government wants in their concursos. So let's get going. Let's have a look at the past exams and see why you need to prepare so well for this exam. So let's get going. This is what the first slide you would normally see when you come into my class here at Clipping. So let's talk about the test. Well, I'm going to put captions on, or subtitles, which we have in every class of mine here at Clipping for the Ofchan, and they will help you a little bit in trying to understand if you've got difficulty. I hope that you don't. So for the Ofchan, the two main exams were in 2016, well, it started in 2015 and 2006, when we had these Ofchan exams. In 2006, the banca, the exam board, was CESV, and in 2016, it was FGV. Now, these two exams are quite different. We see a complete development in the way the Ofchan position was treated. And of course, English was given a lot more emphasis in the more recent exams. But also we see the time difference, almost 10 years between one Ofchan Concurso and the other one. And that's why the Ofchan is coming now. It's that almost that same time difference. It's quite a long time, and more chancellery officials are needed. Now, chancellery officials is my favorite course as well, having had so many people pass, and they go into the MRE and meet the students I've taught at Rio Branco. So it's nice to have a complete set of students working there. Let's go. So let's talk quickly about CESP. So this will help you understand that CESP in 2006 only gave one small text about English, and then you had to write a composition, redação, all right, which we saw recently in Apex, which is just a redação. English is not given enough emphasis at this time, and but now, of course, it's much more important. But as we've got a composition here, all right, on the course, I do compositions as well, because we don't know at this time who will be the examiner. And also, it's good for me to see more writing from you, because when we come to FGV, the texts are much smaller. There are more text to write, but they're smaller, as you will see. And I need an example of writing for you to do. All right, to be able to correct you well, because there's corrections, of course, on the course. I will correct your information individually if you want. If you don't want, you don't have to do that as well. But there is extra facility or offer if you want me to look at your writing. But let's move on. Okay, here's one of the most famous Ofchans, okay? And of course, on the course, we have to focus on what the Ofchan person does, what the official does, okay? And you need to be quite complete in what you're doing and speak English very well. I know Shaun Mendes speaks very well. I've seen him speak. I've actually met him a couple of times. So I've seen him speak, and he's on various international organizations where English is necessary. Okay, so he got his English, I'm sure, by working as an Ofchan. So we have to focus on the job of the Chancelaria. So knowing how to write like an Ofchan, to understand the documents you've got to prepare, are very important today, as we've seen from the past, when in 2006 it was just test your English, to FGV today, which is much more complete in the type of English that they want. Now we're looking at FGV. Then we see the exam was in a whole day. Might be that coming up. I expect next year. Maybe the Itamarchi are deciding to prepare the exam now to do in next year, which they did with FGV in 2015-16. So, of course, they're 4 hours in the morning, which is English, and 4 hours in the afternoon, which also has English. So one complete day. Maybe there could be 2 days this time. I don't know. If it's one complete day, this is also a good model, I think, for the MRE to go back to. So by following this, then, which is the main focus on the course, you'll improve your English a lot and, of course, be well prepared. Let's quickly talk about these different areas. Well, in the first section in the morning, 25% of the whole exam was focused on English. And in the afternoon, which in the second phase, which has a split between Portuguese and English, English was given an equal, let's say, weight or balance to Portuguese. So it shows in other exams, English is always seen as less. But with the Ofchan, English is probably the most important area, along with Portuguese, but it's given a lot more importance. So that's the reason why you've got to be good in English. Last time there were 60 places. I think there are more coming up. So let's see what's going to happen. Okay, and these 2 exams that we have to pass to get past the first phase and the second phase to do very well. Now, the afternoon session was the writing. We're going, so that is what you've got to be preparing for first. Now, adianta, okay? Don't think that when the edital comes out, that's when I'm going to go English. There aren't many teachers who know how to focus on the Ofchan, all right? And of course, with us as well, we're not going to have, we're going to have a limited time to be able to prepare people, okay? The Ofchan doesn't come round every year, like some other exams preparing for the Itamarchi. So many teachers don't focus on it. Different for me. I've been focusing on this exam and preparing people for many, many years. So I'm much more prepared than others in order to face what's going to happen. And by showing you this, hopefully you'll see why I'm more prepared. Anyway, the writing is extremely important. It's 50% of the second phase. And so it's extremely important you're preparing for this before the Concurso. So you see your mistakes and you see your problems. Now, in the last exam, the first phase at that 25%, you see those different areas that probably will fall on the exam in the edital. Again this year, maybe there'll be 1 or 2 extra things, but I expect English to be similar in its weight this time. Then we see that in the first phase, there were just 3 texts to do, and there were 20 questions. So a lot of questions, a lot of time is taken up in the morning. There's 4 hours, so it's 1 hour or more to answer these questions. Of course, this is a long time ago when Gilberto Gil was minister. And of course, at the famous time when he went and played for the United Nations. So this text comes from all of the, such a long time ago. All right, again, 3 texts, the second text being infographics, okay? An infographic graph, an image, and you have to interpret that. The third one is a longer text, okay, less questions than the first one. The first one has about 10 questions. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions, okay? It's usually about language or diplomacy, as it says, use of language or diplomacy here. So you have to know where to get this information from, who writes about language and diplomacy, and have accompanied the way the language has been developed in English, in diplomacy for a period of time. So you can't just get any English teachers, oh, mark this, or give me text. No, you've got to have understood what's happened over the last, well, the last exam is, 8 years ago. So to be able to prepare for this exam and be ready with materials to offer students, which we are to do this exam. And on the course, I have made many simulados, okay, exactly like this for you to do. So you can prepare for the exam. If it was like this, perfectly, you would know exactly how to do it. Even if you were in 2015-16, you'd be well prepared too, okay, as my students were. So in the second phase, of course, there are 3 questions, okay? So there are 3 questions for Portuguese, and of course, 3 questions, I think. 3 questions, I think they're Portuguese, 3 questions, I'm sure there are. And I don't look at Portuguese, actually. And 3 questions, of course, for English. 20 points each question, 60 points. So there's a summary as well. Now, summaries need preparation. If you don't know how to do a summary or you've not practiced, it is the, let's say the bicho papão, the problem, one that people find if they're not prepared. Then there's something called a situation, a communicative situation, and there's an interpretation of a text. Let's have a look what they are. All right, and they're quite specific. Now, you don't find these in normal English classes. They're very specific for this Concurso. And so you can't say, oh, I've done Cambridge exams or the TOEFL, so I know how to do this. You can't, right? You have to know how to prepare. And they can be simple once you know what you're writing about. Now, with this Concurso, there were 15 points for the structure and 5 points for the mistakes. Of course, we want no mistakes. And you can only finish with your mistakes if you prepare by writing. The structure, of course, also needs a lot of writing, but you need to understand how the structure of the different compositions that are required are organized, and of course have plenty of practice to know what your problems are and correct them. Here's what FGV was testing in 2015-16, okay? So we will look at the first one here. We see is a text that had to summarize. So summaries need to be practiced, okay? They're not difficult. But if you're not ready the day of the test and there's a summary on this time on Ofchan, you'll be taking a lot of time, panicking, and making a lot of mistakes. But with regular practice, it's not that difficult. Then there's a very technical, it's called a communicative task, which you need to understand the language of the Ofchan, okay? How they're supposed to respond to a letter, and even Twitter we're doing on the course, okay? Respond in many different ways as a representative of the etymology, okay? So you have to understand the language that goes into this. Maybe writing rules or responding to a letter, okay, informing Brazilians abroad. All those different types of writing need to be understood and practiced, of course. Then at the time, there's this third area, okay, where you had to interpret. It says a text, but actually it was a cartoon at the time, which sometimes falls on sort of, what do you call it, vestibular questions. And this came in FGV. And I see this text and I think an English teacher has made it because it comes from an English teacher's magazine, English teaching magazine, which I wrote in a long time ago. So these are very technical. These are very logical. And you have to really practice them, okay? They're not the same as if you were in any other type of exam. They're very specific to being an Ofchan. Summaries, you often have to do for your boss. Okay. Also, diplomats have to do that. Okay. Writing letters or information, informing the public are very important for the work of an Ofchan. And interpreting information, okay, and then being able to express what it means, which was the third task on FGV, is also a task that an Ofchan would do. They're very logical, these tasks. Now, if we go to the CESP exam, it's not as logical. It's testing basically your level of English and if you can interpret texts. But and the writing usually is much simpler. But CESP is not being used at the moment. So we expect maybe FGV to come back, or another Concurso organization like IAGIS that's been used with the CACD. So we have to understand that this type of Concurso is very specific for the information required to be an Ofchan. Now, the writing is gives these tasks. The reading with FGV are very logical. It's grammar. If I got a grammar book here, which I don't think I've got one at the moment. Always got, here we are. Look, grammar. You've got to know grammar for the FGV. So you have to study a book like that. But vocabulary, of course, is very important. And having texts that are common to this type of exam is not something you can just find like that. You need a teacher like me. You need this specialist information. So when you come on the day of the exam, then it's easy because you know what's going to happen, you know where you're going, and also you know how you're going to achieve the result that you want in order to pass. Now, in 2015 and 16, when there had many students, we managed to prepare people very, very well. And it's nice to see those assistenti Ofchan and those people who did also passed, who didn't pass last time, coming back and focusing on this exam again. Now, if you think you've got a chance and you've got half decent English, then you should be thinking about doing this, okay? So what will we do on, what do you need to do to prepare for an exam of the Ofchan? So what do we need to do to prepare for the Ofchan exam? Well, of course, we need to know the job on Ofchan. And here at Clipping, not just English, there are people who are Ofchan telling you what it is to do the job, giving information on this course, because it's no point going for the job unless you're aware of what you're going to do, because this exam is focused on the work of the Ofchan. It's not general English, it's English for the Ofchan. Okay, so we have to know what the job is, and that's what we'll do also on the English course. So we have to have lots of exam-style reading exercises. These are prepared on the course, just like FGV, some CESB-style questions, so you're familiar with the type of questions that you'll get on the test. And hopefully these texts that we're using will fall on the day of the test too, but don't tell anyone. Okay. Then we've got to understand the different styles of writing. This is very specific. As I said, you can't do this any other way. There are many different types of reading that you need, and writings that, of course, an Ofchan needs to know about. Okay, press releases, responding to inquiries, participating in events, and managing basically their website, and responsible for communicating with Brazilians abroad. So we do this on the course, okay? On the Ofchan, you will be writing these types of texts. Okay, so then you'd be corrected to see what your mistakes are by using the correct context that's needed for these exams, okay? Here, for example, is an example of an Official Chancellery notice. How do you write that? We will practice that. And any possible questions that could come up on the Concurso. So you know exactly the type of grammar and vocabulary. It's very specific, okay, to this type of writing. You can't just get this anywhere. You've got to really analyze the text, and only a teacher who really understands the Ofchan can help you. So knowing your writing mistakes and stopping them comes from preparing with these different types of texts. So you need feedback. So I will give you feedback, of course, on your writing, tell you what the mistakes are. Of course, if the organization of your text needs to change, you're not doing something right, then I will tell you what to do. And you'll have more opportunities to do further writing to correct these mistakes, because that's important in the process of learning a language and preparing for such an important concurso. Then, of course, during the course, we're going to study the grammar and vocabulary, as we saw with that text on the notice, the specific grammar and vocabulary we need. Okay, so that we're going to go through that, and strategies to how to improve vocabulary are very important. So how do we do that? Well, we don't do it just by underlining the words and looking in the dictionary. No, we have to know how to the information is put together, as we see in this example from one part of the course, okay? And how to work more autonomously to access this vocabulary and learn it. It's not difficult, but you need the techniques of how to focus on texts about the Ofchan, or text about diplomacy, or what's happening in Brazilian policy, international affairs, or foreign policy at the moment, in order to be able to use that vocabulary in your writing. Okay, and the next one, of course, is to learn to do full exams under pressure. And at the end of the course, once you've learned how to do all of the different possible types of questions, writing questions, and reading questions for the exam, at the end, I'm going to give you, at the end of the course, full exams, so you really know how to pass. Okay, so you feel the pressure, you understand the strategy you need, because it's not just having good English. you need to perform well on the day of the test. So knowing how to pass the test requires doing full examinations, okay? Like this. So the example we've got in the original FGV test with 20 questions and the types of writing as well are the ones that we do throughout the test, throughout the course, all the way through. There's lots of information involved. So, lots of writing, lots of reading, lots of building up your grammar and vocabulary in the context of the Ofchan, okay? The course is specifically made that whatever's going to happen when the edital comes out, you will be ready. And then you only need to adjust if there's anything new on the Ofchan. Remember what I said at the start of this session, really. You have to prepare in advance for English. It's the most important part of this exam, okay? Also, it's English. So many of you don't speak English every day. Maybe you've got good English, but you need time to prepare. And of course, you need to prepare the third part with the information that's going to be in this exam under pressure. So then you perform and pass. Well, I've done this before of course, I do it every year with the CACD, but I've done this before a lot in 2015 and 16 in Ofchan. So some of you may be coming back to me now. You've seen this. Some of you who haven't worked with me before, please come and join me. Okay, Clipping is a very complete Concurso company. Lots of different texts, lots of different information to help you prepare for these styles of international government agencies, okay? And that's why it's more specific than any other concurso. They just don't do it the last minute. They prepare for a long time. So you've not just got a course with a specialist like me who understands what's happening at the etymology, but also you've got lots more information, lots more examples to be able to prepare. I've prepared a lot of them over the last years, okay? So remember, really the best, it's not just, you know, thinking of getting you here now, it's what's your best preparation. I'm an English teacher. I prepare people to pass examinations at the highest level and working in advance, because when the edital hits us, things are going to go crazy, and there'll be some subject maybe that you don't know that you've suddenly got to do at the last minute, and you have to leave the most important exercises, say in English, which is the most important subject, to one side. You have to leave it to focus on something that you don't know. Okay, and you think, well, English can be left for a little while and I'll come back to it. No, remember, English is the most important, and then therefore those who score the highest will be the ones who pass the concurso. Okay, so if there's any adjustment to the edital, of course, there's only a little bit of adjustment needs to be made, and I'll be doing that too. But doing the course and getting ready now is fundamental for you to score the high and pass this test. It doesn't happen every year. It happens every 8 to 10 years. So, and your life, of course, will be much better. I know many Ofchan people around the globe. Many of them were my friends before they studied as well, and their life has changed with their family and their children living in other parts of the world. And I think they enjoy it too. And this could be for you. So all the best. Join me on this course. It's important. My guess is maybe November, this thing will happen. So it's important you get your English out of the way and only make that adjustment at the last minute. Okay? All the best. Bye-bye.